Every single day, little Ava Mitchell woke up in a bedroom that looked more like a hospital room than a place where a 7-year-old should be living. Pill bottles lined up on the nightstand like little soldiers. A medical chart hanging on the wall. Blackout curtains keeping the sunlight out because her mother said the light gave Ava headaches. And Ava herself, pale, quiet, tired, lying in that bed like she had already accepted that this was just her life now. Her father, Richard Mitchell, was one of the wealthiest men in the state of Connecticut. He owned 3 companies, had a penthouse in Manhattan, and his face had been on the cover of 2 business magazines. From the outside, the Mitchell family had everything. But inside that house, something was deeply wrong, and nobody could see it. Nobody except a 34-year-old woman named Carol Simmons, who had just started working there as Ava's nanny. This is the story of how one woman's instinct and one decision to look under a little girl's bed brought down a web of lies that had been running for years. Richard Mitchell had married his wife, Diana, when they were both in their late 20s. Diana was charming, beautiful, and incredibly well put together. Everyone loved her. At charity events, she was always the one organizing things, rallying people, giving the most heartfelt speeches about sick children and hospital fundraisers. People would cry listening to her talk. She was that good. When Ava was born, Diana became even more involved in the medical community. She started volunteering at a children's hospital. She made friends with several doctors. She donated money. She was, by all appearances, a devoted mother who happened to have a child with a very complicated medical history. Ava had been sick since she was 3 years old. It started with what Diana described as chronic fatigue. Then came the stomach problems. Then the headaches. Then the sensitivity to light. Then a possible autoimmune condition. Then something with her heart. The list kept growing every year, like weeds in a garden. By the time Ava was 7, she had seen over 20 different specialists. She had been hospitalized 4 times. She had missed almost 2 full years of school. And she had been on, at various points, 11 different medications. Richard paid every bill without questioning it. He trusted Diana completely. She was the one home with Ava. She was the one going to every appointment. He was busy running his companies, traveling for work, closing deals. Diana handled everything at home. And she did it, he thought, with incredible dedication. He hired Carol because Diana had convinced him that Ava needed round-the-clock care and that Diana herself was exhausted from years of being a caregiver. It sounded reasonable. Richard agreed and found Carol through an agency. Carol showed up on a Monday morning in early spring. She had worked with children for over 10 years in daycares, as a private nanny, even briefly in a pediatric ward as a care assistant. She knew kids. She knew what sick kids looked like, how they acted, how they talked. And within her first week in the Mitchell house, something was pulling at the back of her mind like a loose thread she couldn't stop touching. Ava didn't seem sick. That sounds simple. But understand, Carol had been told extensively about Ava's conditions before starting the job. She had been given a thick folder with medical summaries, medication schedules, dietary restrictions, and a daily care plan. She had expected to walk in and find a fragile little girl who needed serious help. Instead, she found a child who, the moment her mother left the room, became a completely different person. When Diana was around, Ava was quiet, slow-moving, hunched over, speaking in a small voice. She would say things like, "My tummy hurts," or "My head feels heavy," almost on cue, right when Diana would look at her. But when Diana stepped out, to take a phone call, to run an errand, to go to one of her many charity lunches, Ava would sit up straighter. Her eyes would get brighter. She would talk more. She asked Carol once if they could go outside and look at the garden, because she hadn't been allowed outside in 3 weeks. 3 weeks. A 7-year-old girl who hadn't felt the sun on her face in 3 weeks because her mother said it would hurt her. Carol started paying close attention. She noticed that Ava would sometimes forget to act sick. She'd be laughing at something on a tablet, completely absorbed. And then Diana would walk in and Ava's face would fall, not from pain, but from what looked like trained response, like a reflex. She had been taught over years, without even knowing she was being taught it. Carol also noticed the medications. Every morning and every evening, Diana would bring Ava her pills with a small glass of water. She would watch Ava take them. Carol once asked, casually, what one of the medications was for. Diana looked at her with a flat smile and said, That's not something you need to worry about. That was the moment Carol decided to start doing her own quiet investigation. She began small. She would look up the medications online when she had a free moment. Some of them were legitimate, antihistamines, a mild acid reflux medication, but others were harder to pin down. One, in particular, was a prescription sedative typically used in adults for anxiety disorders. Another was a medication that, in higher doses, could cause nausea, fatigue, and stomach cramping. Both were being given to a 7-year-old girl. Both had been prescribed by the same doctor, one who, Carol noticed, had signed off on almost every single one of Ava's major diagnoses over the last 4 years. Carol felt sick herself. She needed more. She needed something concrete before she could go to anyone with what she was seeing. And that concrete something came on a Tuesday afternoon when Diana left for a 4-hour charity committee meeting, and Carol was alone in the house with Ava. Ava, as usual, was more energetic. They were in her room, and Carol was straightening up when she noticed something. The bed skirt, the fabric panel that went around the base of Ava's bed and reached the floor, was bunched up awkwardly on one side, like something was pushing it from underneath. Carol looked at Ava, who was sitting cross-legged on the bed reading a picture book. "Hey," Carol said, "can I look under your bed?" Ava's eyes got wide. Not scared, more like surprised, like she hadn't expected anyone to ask. "Mama says I'm not allowed to keep anything under there," Ava said quietly. "I know," Carol said gently. "But can I look anyway?" Ava hesitated. Then she nodded. Carol crouched down and lifted the bed skirt. What she found there changed everything. Pushed against the back wall, hidden in the shadows, was a cardboard box. Inside the box were two things: a small notebook with a child's handwriting in it, and a plastic bag filled with pills, dozens of them, in various colors and sizes, some loose, some still in their foil packaging. Carol's hands were shaking as she opened the notebook. The handwriting was Ava's, messy, uneven, the way second graders write. And what was written inside were dates. Dates going back almost a year. And next to each date, a small note. Pretended to take pill. Put in bag. Hid 2 today. Mama didn't check my mouth this time. Felt better today. Ran in backyard when Mama wasn't watching. Ava, 7 years old, had been secretly hiding her medications for nearly a year, because she had figured out, on her own, that when she didn't take them, she felt better. A 7-year-old had solved the mystery that every doctor had missed. Carol sat on the floor of that bedroom for a long moment, holding that notebook, trying to keep herself together. Then she took photos of everything: the pills, the notebook, each page of dates. She put everything back exactly as she had found it. She stood up, walked to Ava, sat beside her on the bed, and said in the calmest voice she could manage, "You're not sick, are you?" Ava looked at her with those big, tired eyes and shook her head slowly. "I don't think so," she whispered. "But Mama says I am." Carol called Richard Mitchell that same evening. He didn't believe her at first. Of course he didn't. This was his wife, the woman he had been married to for 9 years. The woman who had spent years of her life, he believed, sacrificing everything to care for their daughter. He told Carol she was overreacting, that she didn't understand Ava's complex medical history, and that maybe this job wasn't the right fit for her. Carol told him to look up the medication in the bag before he made any decisions. He called back 40 minutes later. His voice was different. He had looked it up. He had also, while he was at it, called a friend of his who was a physician. He read the list of medications to him over the phone. The friend had gone quiet. Then he had said, carefully, that the combination of those particular medications, especially given the dosages listed on some of the labels, would cause exactly the symptoms that Ava had been experiencing for years: fatigue, nausea, stomach pain, weakness. Someone had been making Ava sick on purpose. What followed was fast and devastating. Richard contacted a lawyer and a private physician the very next morning. Ava was examined, properly, independently, by doctors who had no prior relationship with Diana. Their conclusion was clear. Ava Mitchell was a healthy child. There was no autoimmune condition. There was no chronic illness. There was no heart issue. Her body, aside from some effects that would take time to clear, was normal. The condition she had been suffering from has a name. It's called medical child abuse, sometimes referred to as Munchausen syndrome by proxy. It's when a caregiver, almost always a parent, deliberately causes or fabricates illness in a child in order to gain attention, sympathy, or a sense of control. Studies estimate it affects somewhere between 1 and 2 children per every 100,000 in the United States every year. But experts believe it's massively underreported because it is extraordinarily difficult to detect. The abuser is usually the most trusted person in the room. Diana Mitchell was arrested 11 days after Carol made that phone call. The trial was quiet compared to how big the story was. Diana's lawyers argued that she had genuinely believed Ava was sick, that she had been misled by doctors, that she was herself a victim of medical misinformation. The jury didn't buy it. The hidden notebook, the secret stash of medications, and the testimony of multiple physicians who said the drug combination Ava had been receiving could not have been accidental. It was too specific, too consistent, too deliberate. Diana was convicted of child endangerment and medical child abuse. She was sentenced to 12 years in prison. Richard Mitchell, for his part, resigned from the boards of 2 of his companies. In the aftermath and quietly stepped back from public life. He has never spoken to the press about what happened. Those who know him say he carries the guilt of not seeing it, of being so busy, so trusting, so absent, like a stone he can never put down. Ava Mitchell spent 6 months in therapy. She went to school for the first time at 7.5 years old. Her teacher said that on her first day, she sat by the window during lunch and kept lifting her face toward the sunlight, like she was memorizing what it felt like. Carol Simmons left the childcare field the year after and now works as an advocate for child abuse awareness, speaking at schools and hospitals about the signs of medical child abuse. She says the thing she thinks about most is not the pills or the notebook or even the trial. It's the moment she asked Ava if she could look under the bed. And Ava, after all those years of being told what to feel, what to say, how sick she was, looked up at her and nodded. Someone, finally, was asking the right question. There are thousands of children right now in homes just like Ava's, being told they are sick, being kept small, being handed pills by the one person they trust most in the world. And most of them don't have a Carol. Most of them don't have a notebook. Most of them don't have anyone who thinks to look under the bed. This story isn't just about one family. It's about what happens when love is used as a weapon, and what it takes for one person with the right instincts and enough courage to say, something isn't right here, even when everyone else believes it is. Ava is 11 now. She plays soccer. She has a best friend named Lily. She has a dog named Biscuit who sleeps at the foot of her bed, and nothing is hidden underneath it anymore.